It started as most house sits do, with a cat, Pat, not short for anything, just Pat, Pat the cat. A ginger tabby, the taste for smoked salmon, Evian water, and an attitude that said, "You work for me now." I was staying in a very architecturally assertive home belonging to Ramona and Rich, a kind of house that looked like it had been curated rather than lived in. All glass balustrades, whisper quiet drawers, and light switches that required a manual to operate. I'd sat for them many times before, so when Ramona and Rich booked me again, I said yes without hesitation. They lived in a massive 6-bedroom place, the kind that smelled of wealth and lemon oil. Rich was always polite in a cold sweat kind of way, like he'd once accidentally smiled in a photo and had been punishing himself ever since. Ramona was warm in the way that steam is, pleasant enough at first, but she gave you the impression she could be scalding if you lingered too long. Together, they were the type of couple who labelled everything in the pantry and colour-coded their herb garden. And then there was Pat. Pat, the cat, had the temperament of a sleep-deprived duchess and the emotional warmth of a marble bench top. Apparently, I was the only human, aside from Ramona and Rich, that Pat had ever warmed to. Not just tolerated, but warmed to. Pat followed me from room to room. She sat on my suitcase and slept near my feet. Ramona once referred to it as a miracle, and Rich called it odd, which from him was high praise. Ramona ran the place like a luxury hotel with 0 guests. Everything had a label. Even the labels had backup labels. And so many decorative cushions that at times it felt like I was navigating the showroom section of a bedding outlet. Sitting down meant removing at least 5 decorative pillows from any given surface. They were heading off to collect a boat, a catamaran no less, and sailing it back over several days. "We'll be out of range," Ramona had told me, placing the house key on the kitchen bench like she was handing over a Fabergé egg. "But if it's urgent," she said, "just do your best to reach us." It wasn't even 72 hours before that instruction aged like rotten milk. The incident happened one night around 10 p.m. I was doing my usual pre-bed perimeter check, making sure doors were locked, lights were off, and pretending to understand their wall-mounted control panel, and making sure that Pat the cat was accounted for, the kind of soothing little routine that makes you feel more in control than you probably are. I was walking past Ramona and Rich's bedroom when something caught my eye. Not movement exactly, more like presence. Right there, perfectly centered in their bedroom doorway, was Pat's dinner that had resurfaced right on their luxury cream carpet. Pat the cat had chosen her moment with almost comedic precision, and there she was, sitting proudly beside it as I took a photo to document and send to Ramona. In the photo I took, Pat looked like she was auditioning for a crime docuseries. I swear she looked into the lens like, "Yes, I did this and I regret nothing." I wasn't panicked. Cats throw up. It's gross. It's inconvenient, but it happens. and Pat didn't seem distressed. In fact, she looked mildly smug, so no late-night vet emergencies were required. I took photos. I tried to get in touch with Ramona and Rich, partly to let them know, but mostly to get their written blessing before I touched a single thread of their carpet, which probably had a name, a birth certificate, and a dedicated trust fund. I figured they might want to weigh in on which gold standard fibre-safe cat regret removal method they preferred. But the message didn't go through. No reply, just that quiet little note, undeliverable. They'd warned me they might be out of range, sailing their new catamaran back from somewhere scenic and obscenely photogenic, the kind of place where signal drops but the champagne doesn't. I grabbed some cloths and warm soapy water. I figured I'd better get to it before it permanently introduced itself to the carpet. I started blotting carefully, but the stain was already making itself at home. Faint, but obvious, like it knew exactly what it was doing. I didn't want to risk making it worse by waiting around for Ramona to resurface, so I checked the laundry. Front and centre on the shelf, Vanish carpet foam. Looked like it had been waiting for this exact scenario. Instructions printed right on the back. Foam, wait, blot. No rubbing, no improvising. I followed the instructions to the full stop, and for a moment I thought it had worked, until it started to dry. The mark darkened into something far more obvious, and the foam had left a bleached ring around it like a spotlight on my failure. It was too late to call an emergency carpet cleaner, not that I knew if such a thing even existed. And, seeing as it was Pat the cat's fault, not me spilling stir-fry or red wine in some midnight juggling act, I figured I'd wait to see what Ramona said. Maybe their insurance would cover it. I had to leave it for the night to avoid making it worse, and until I could speak to Ramona. There was nothing more I could do, just that sick, heavy feeling in the pit of my stomach, the kind that keeps you half awake, picturing the worst case scenarios and mentally pricing out brand new rugs. If I dreamt at all that night, it was mostly beige and slightly damp. Early the next morning, I finally heard from them. They were totally fine about it, calm, reassuring. I was actually quite distressed about the whole thing, but Ramona just said, "These things happen, don't worry, it's all fixable." Rich echoed it with a breezy, "Pat's done far worse." I hung up thinking, disaster averted, human decency still alive and well. But then they came home, and everything turned sour. It started politely. They asked me to arrange a professional carpet cleaner. They said the patch was more visible than they'd expected. They said it was likely the product had damaged the fibres. I tried to explain that I'd used their product, that I'd only acted because they were quite literally sailing off the grid, and that it wasn't my mess, it was Pat's, and frankly she didn't seem remotely sorry. I could completely understand them wanting me to organise a carpet cleaner if I'd, say, dropped an entire beetroot salad or set fire to a cheese platter. But this was an inevitable event in the life of anyone who owns a cat with a stomach and a sense of drama. It would have happened whether I was there or not. Thanks, Pat. Pat the cat. Really appreciate this pickle you've got me in. But nothing I said seemed to matter. Ramona worked in sales, luxury property I think, so she knew exactly how to apply pressure without ever raising her voice. Just enough suggestion, just enough pause, the kind of tone that makes "we'd appreciate it if you could organise professional cleaning" sound like a legally binding contract. I started to feel concerned. I started to feel cornered and guilty, even though I knew I shouldn't be. So I buckled. Reluctantly I booked the carpet cleaner, paid for it myself because arguing felt harder than handing over my card. I took time out of my diary. I travelled all the way back out to their house, which wasn't exactly around the corner, and I waited there while the carpet cleaner did his thing. They weren't home, of course. The carpet cleaner took one look at the patch and grimaced. "Let me guess," he said. "Vanish carpet foam." I nodded. He sighed. "That stuff ruins more carpets than it saves. People think it's some kind of miracle product. It's basically just a fibre-burning bleach mousse." He did what he could, which wasn't much. I sent the update in writing over email, but Ramona and Rich didn't respond straight away. And then when they did, the conversation turned from fix it to replace it. They'd had the carpet assessed. It was discontinued, and since it couldn't be patched to match, they informed me I'd need to recarpet the entire upstairs of their 6-bedroom home because they were planning to sell and needed consistency. Consistency. Apparently, I had compromised the resale value of their home by using the wrong product from their laundry cupboard to clean up their cat's regurgitated dinner during a time when they were unreachable. I was stunned, to say the least. It was around then that I reached out to the house-sitting website I'd been booked through. I laid everything out: photos, call logs, product shots, even a copy of the receipt from the carpet cleaner. Their reply came the next day. They confirmed that I'd done nothing wrong. I'd acted responsibly, documented the incident, attempted a reasonable clean-up using a household product meant for carpets from their laundry, paid for a professional cleaner, and gone back to let them in and sit there while the cleaning was conducted. And as the issue was caused by a pet in my care and not by my negligence or misuse on my part, they said they'd be contacting the owners directly to reiterate that I was not deemed at fault and they should be progressing this through their insurance company at this time, and all future communications with me would be closed. This was somewhat comforting, or so I thought. A few weeks passed. I just about patched up my nerves from the whole Pat the cat and the carpet debacle. I'd even toyed with the idea of giving up house-sitting altogether. I mean, how many ways could one gig quietly unravel your sanity? So, when an unknown number lit up my phone screen one Tuesday morning, I did what I usually do and stared at it suspiciously, willing it to stop and go to voicemail. And then, for some reason, I answered it. I think I was still halfway through making my first coffee for the day, and before my brain caught up, I found myself saying, "Hello?" A woman's voice launched straight in, fast, upbeat, and completely ignoring the concept of conversational rhythm. "Hi, is this Sash? I'm Clara. You were recommended to me. I've got a bit of an odd one. I was wondering if you'd be open to boat sitting. It's just for 4 days, nothing intense. It's moored at the marina near me. We're heading inland and we just need someone on board while we're away to keep things aired out. Check the power's connected. Make sure no one messes with the ropes. You'd basically just be reading and enjoying the view." Before I could ask who had recommended me, she was already asking for my email. "I'll shoot over the full details. It's all straightforward. You're perfect, seriously." Then click. Call ended. No number saved and no way to call her back. The email came through less than an hour later. Details were vague but plausible. She said her and her husband were heading to a wellness retreat inland, somewhere off-grid and overdue, she said. They didn't want to leave the boat unoccupied just in case. Apparently there had been a few incidents at the marina recently, minor theft, ropes tampered with, and a scratched hull. Probably kids, she wrote, but enough to make us rethink leaving it alone. "We just need someone to keep an eye on things and air it out a bit. It's only 4 days. I'll meet you at the boat to walk you through it," she added. "The harbour master knows you're coming, just ask for the tether." So far normal, but the tone was familiar. Warm, breezy, too breezy. Phrases started to jump out on the second read. "Don't stress about any marks, we've cleaned up worse. No dogs or cats here to cough up fur balls. And don't go overboard. Literally, don't fall overboard." I paused at the last one. Why would I go overboard? Also, why did she feel the need to capitalize the word cat, like it was aimed at someone specific? But somehow Clara's tone felt just a little too rehearsed. Still, part of me wanted to believe she was just an eccentric boat owner with bad email etiquette. So I said yes. The boat was beautiful, all glossy timber and polished chrome, docked in a quiet corner of the marina, bobbing gently. Clara was already waiting for me when I arrived. She waved like we were old friends. She mentioned in passing that they'd been living on the boat for a few weeks while their house was being renovated. She said it like it was nothing, but inside it felt sparse, not abandoned, just oddly minimal for a place people had supposedly been living in. A few utensils, 2 plates, a half-used bottle of olive oil, enough to cook, sleep and sip something while watching the sunset, but not much else. No clutter, no signs of life, just enough to prove someone had been there. Clara gave me the basics, how to plug in the power line, where to find the safety gear, which cupboard the ginger biscuits lived in, which was odd because I hadn't told her I liked ginger biscuits. Ramona had always stocked ginger biscuits for me. She once called it our shared indulgence. Clara said the same thing, almost word for word. That's when I started to feel it, that low, creeping chill behind the ribs, like I'd walked into a scene that had already been rehearsed. Clara even made a point of showing me the little bar fridge, just in case you bring wine. And she said, I mean, who doesn't enjoy wine alone on a boat, right? Just be careful of stains. She laughed. I didn't. And then she was gone. The first night was quiet, too quiet. The marina should have felt peaceful, boats gently shifting, rigging tapping, the usual night sounds. Instead it felt staged, like someone trying to convince me that everything was normal. I fell asleep eventually. At 2:40 a.m. I woke up. Footsteps on the deck, not seagulls, not ropes. Shoes, pacing, measured, calm. I held my breath. The steps paused, then creaked again, shifting weight. I sat up, heart racing, and waited, but nothing. I got up and climbed the stairs to check, but the dock was still, completely still. One of the mooring lines was loose, not off, just coiled strangely, like it had been rewrapped by someone in a hurry, or someone trying to make it look like they hadn't touched it. I tied it tighter. I checked the others, but I didn't sleep much after that. The next morning I noticed something strange. The towels Clara told me not to move. They weren't in the same place. Folded, yes, but differently. The pile was rotated slightly, the top towel facing the wrong way, like someone had picked them up, hesitated, and put them back too carefully. There was also a faint smell in the cabin, not foul, just off, like wet fabric that had been recently dried, or something chemical, barely there but clinging. By midday I was already on edge. I heard movement above deck while I was in the galley, light but deliberate. When I rushed up, there was no one there, just a cup on the table I don't remember putting there. No liquid, no handle, just there. I told myself I was overthinking, that it was all just the wind, movement, nerves. I also started closing the hatch behind me, locking it, listening harder at night. By the second day, little things started to shift. I'd wake up to find the power line unplugged, not fully, just enough. Ropes I'd double-checked before bed would be looser in the morning. Once a deck chair had moved positions entirely. I again put it down to the wind. I realized it had been folded. Then the smell started. Just a hint of something chemical, familiar. It took me a day to place it, and then I realized it was Vanish. I opened a lower cupboard out of curiosity, and there it was, a bottle of Vanish gold carpet foam. Same branding, same pink lid, still sealed. The same faint, nose-stinging scent drifted out as I crouched there, just like from Ramona's laundry. Too specific to mistake. I closed the cupboard and stumbled backwards. I told myself maybe it was just a coincidence, but it didn't feel like one. That night I did my usual checks. Lines secure, lights off, everything in its place. I locked the hatch behind me twice. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Not from the dock, but from below. A kind of pressure, like the space was smaller than it had been the night before. At 1:13 a.m. I woke up to the faint sound of humming, low, female, just outside the hull. It stopped as soon as I sat up. When I opened the hatch and stepped out onto the deck, it was dead still, but one of the deck chairs, the one I hadn't touched all week, was now facing the opposite direction, turned towards the water. At 2:31 a.m, I heard the click of the kettle switch flicking. At some point, I must have fallen asleep again, but only for a short while. Not rest, more like a reset. On the last morning, I woke to a strange silence. The usual bobbing rhythm of the boat felt different, heavier, slower. I climbed topside and realized why. The boat had come unmoored. I was drifting, not far, just gently out into the bay, still close enough to see the marina. I'd been house-sitting for years, strange houses, stranger homeowners. I'd had my fair share of creepy and unexplained over the years. Cold spots, flickering lights, weird mirrors, the usual passive-aggressive post-it notes from nowhere. But I'd never found myself floating in the middle of open water before. Now, in the span of a few short weeks, I'd gone from model house-sitter to the main character in a slow-burn psychological boating incident, to the unwitting villain in a high-stakes carpet catastrophe, where I was emotionally blackmailed into funding the recarpeting of the entire second floor of a 6-bedroom mansion like I had a spare 20 grand tucked behind my ear. All because a cat coughed up dinner and I dared to use a carpet-appropriate product in the laundry. And now I was drifting through the bay in a boat I couldn't operate, wondering what exactly I'd done to deserve becoming the lead in someone else's mind game grudge. The sheer terror of realizing I was now alone on a boat I didn't know how to operate was something else. I knew how to plug in the shore power and check the lines, but that was about it. Beyond that, the only thing I could steer was well clear of any future boat-sitting gigs. Panic rose. I scanned the helm, hoping for some kind of emergency switch, a radio, a map. Rushing back below deck, I knocked a magazine off the bench in the process. It hit the floor with a papery slap, and from between the pages a photo fluttered out. I crouched down to grab it. It was glossy, real, and slightly curled at the corners. The photo was 2 couples, sun-drenched and laughing, standing on the deck of a boat, the same boat I was currently drifting on. One pair was unmistakably Ramona and Rich, the other Clara and a man that I could only assume was her husband, smiling and laughing like it was all one big inside joke. In this moment, I started thinking back to when I first met Clara at the marina. She'd handed me the keys and gave me the rundown and scribbled her number on the back of a marina brochure saying, "I'll be out of range most of the time, but just in case." She said she and her husband were heading to a rural retreat for a few days, with barely any signal, so I hadn't bothered them until the boat came loose. I grabbed the crumpled brochure with Clara's number on it and dialed. "We're sorry, the number you have dialed has been disconnected or is no longer in service." That's when the panic kicked in properly. I immediately called 000 and explained the situation in a rush. They patched me through to the water police, who dispatched a unit and had me towed back to the marina. They were kind but also confused. "So you don't own the boat?" "No," I said, "I was boat sitting." "For a woman named Clara," they said. "Yes." "And you can't contact her?" "No," I said, "the number she gave me has been disconnected." "Do you know her surname?" "No," I said. I gave them the email address that Clara had first contacted me with. They took a full statement and said they'd look into it. A few days later I followed up with them. "We weren't able to trace the email, it bounces, and the boat isn't registered under the name Clara at all. The registered owner's name is different, but it looks like your Clara has used a few aliases over the years. There's a flagged insurance case under her real name from a few years ago. Property damage, claim disputes, that kind of thing. Nothing recent and nothing we can act on, but it's interesting nevertheless." They logged a report and that was it. Technically, no crime had been committed, no damage done, just a woman with too many names in a boat that floated too far. Then there was the photo. It had slipped out of the magazine the morning the boat came unmoored, a glossy, real-deal photo tucked between pages like a secret. Two couples, arms looped, sunlit, smiling on the deck of the boat. Ramona and Rich, and Clara and her husband, all together like this had never been about a boat. I thought about Pat the cat, and the carpet, about Clara's fast-talking voice and how she'd known things I'd never said. I don't know what the plan was, and maybe there wasn't one. Maybe they just wanted to rattle me, or remind me who was in control. Or maybe they just wanted to see if they could make me vanish. A fortnight later, I got a call. No number and no voice initially. It was just the sound of water lapping gently, and beneath it, humming, the same off-key tune I'd heard that night when I was boat-sitting. Then I heard a voice, calm, icy. It was Ramona. "No hard feelings," she said. Then the line cut out. Later that week, a parcel arrived with no return address. Inside was a small Tupperware container. I peeled back the lid. Ginger biscuits, still warm. At the bottom of the box was a note, short, handwritten in a looping scrawl. "Consider the carpet incident forgiven." I never really understood after that why Ramona and Rich may have done this to me. I guess it was never about the boat, it was about me. I humiliated them, I cost them money, I broke their trust, and in return they orchestrated a mind game to remind me that they can control the narrative and maybe my reality too. Thanks for listening to The Vanish, a gentle reminder that not every house or boat sit is as innocent as it seems, and sometimes the people we leave behind don't stay behind. Thank you for drifting with me in tonight's tale. If you enjoyed this soft-spoken story, feel free to subscribe, leave a comment, or share it with a fellow lover of quiet chills. There'll be more eerie house sits just around the corner. Until then, good night.